A horrifying cult-like tradition of abuse has been uncovered at one of South Africa's most famous universities. Stellenbosch University is usually known for its academic excellence. It's usually 3rd, 4th, or 5th out of the South African universities in the worldwide university rankings, and it's also epically famous for its rugby playing tradition that has created so many Springboks. But in the last week, Stellenbosch has been in the news because of Wilgenhof residence, a decades upon decades old student residence, which has been accused of having an absolutely vile, bigoted, and nightmare-inducing tradition of treatment of its own students at the hands of its students. But let's look at what the accusations are and what exactly has been going on at Stellenbosch University. This is technically an episode of News Worth Knowing, where once a week we catch you up on 3 of the biggest and most consequential news stories facing South Africa. But today is kind of a special episode because yes, there's been a lot of news. Bafana beat Morocco. Zuma has been suspended by the ANC. Mandela's auction of his most personal items that we've covered on other episodes of this show has also been suspended. But the only real massive news story is Wilgenhof. So we're going to be covering Wilgenhof fully on this episode of News Worth Knowing. Remember, you can find our podcasts on all of the major podcast streamers and go check out our Patreon where we have exclusive interviews with experts on big issues facing South Africa. We've just published an interview with a misinformation expert who describes 2 major misinformation networks that are trying to dupe South Africans into believing something that's not the case in the lead up to the 2024 election. This is The Issue with Dan Corder. South Africa is a movie. Welcome to the watch party. Let's talk about Wilgenhof residence at Stellenbosch University. A student at Stellenbosch University who was placed in Wilgenhof residence wrote a 23-page document and sent it to the university alleging widespread abuses, rights violations done to that student and many other students by older university students at Wilgenhof. The whistleblower describes harrowing abuse that they experienced and witnessed happen to others in 2022. This included being forced to strip naked and having their body parts mocked and shamed, being forced to drink a mixture, some kind of concoction that induced violent and deeply painful diarrhea, and also having a urine-like substance being poured over their bodies. All of this in and around Wilgenhof during 2022, and a lot of it in an absolutely spine-chilling punishment room. University staff then raided the residence and found 2 rooms that were locked completely shut, and mysteriously nobody knew who had the key, so the staff had to batter the doors down. One of the rooms is like out of a horror film. It was known as the Strafkamer, the disciplinary room, and was run by the Nachtligte, which was the disciplinary committee. That's the name that they gave themselves, the disciplinary committee of Wilgenhof residents. These are the people, the disciplinary committee, who have been meting out horrifying punishments, deeply traumatizing ones, to other Wilgenhof students for so many years. Disciplinary committee after committee, often committing the same acts, and we have the evidence. The Strafkamer had names of people who were on the disciplinary committee in the Nachtligte graffitied on the walls over many different years of different committees. Above the door frame of the room is also graffitied the number 88. Now, 88 has long been used as a symbol for Nazism. It's seen as a shorthand abbreviation for the Nazi salute. The staff found a collection of black hoods that were KKK, Ku Klux Klan in style, that has been worn by the Nachtligte when they're dealing out their psychic punishment for many years. And on some of these hoods were the number 88, just like the 88 above the doorframe. They found a used condom. They found fermenting cement and linseed oil, probably to be used to induce violent, dangerous diarrhea in first years who they chose to punish. They also found crude drawings of male sexual assault. They found drawings of Nachtligte in executioner-style garb with their terrifying masks. And they also found lists of students, including one list describing 3 students who needed to be taken out. And if that wasn't crazy enough, they also found an indemnity form that seems to legally give a private company the legal permission, the right, to run boot camp-style exercise programs and indemnifies them once the student signs it, indemnifies the private company from serious injuries or death. And it turns out this private company seems to have been formed by ex-Wilgenhof student residents, showing like an intergenerational kind of engagement in this horrible, dangerous tradition. And it seems like the university must have known about it, because written down from March 2020, these SRC meeting minutes are the allegations that the Nachlichter have been wearing these terrifying hoods, these executioner style, KKK style black hoods, and committing various abuses against students. And the SRC insists that these allegations, these minutes, were handed over to university management, and management insists that there were ongoing investigations, but clearly nearly 4 years later, not particularly good or effective. And then, mind-blowingly for me, just a few days ago, Stellenbosch University painted over these 2 rooms, painted over all of this graffiti, all of this evidence. Now, Stellenbosch University is insisting that they did that because they wanted to paint over the rooms so that these rooms could be used for their original purpose. But by that they mean so that they can be used as residence rooms by students. Absolutely not. Imagine being the student who gets the room that has been used as that strafkammer nightmare from hell, probably neo-Nazi, white supremacist, definitely violent, traumatizing and abusive room. Imagine you got that room. I could not sleep at night. The ghosts, the energies, the spirits, the sense of space, just by knowing that you got that room. Mad. And the university staff is now trying to do massive PR damage control, which makes sense. They are currently receiving thousands and thousands of first-year university students straight out of high school, straight out of matric, and like life orientation, which can't prepare you for anything, but life orientation, I mean, nothing can prepare you for this. So the university is trying to reassure all of its parents, particularly those whose kids have been placed in Wilgenhof. But I just feel like, at this point, you've got to disband it. You've got to disband the whole house. You've got to lay disciplinary charges against all of the students who are already there, who knew about it, who were part of it, people who are on the Nachlichter. We know who are on those disciplinary committees. You've got to leave that building empty. I'm not saying knock it down, but like there needs to be like an exorcism or something, because like it is so evil. The abuse is so profound, and we know has been going for so many decades. You just can't, there's no business as usual. And what has also been really wild in the last few days is to see how many South Africans, particularly white South Africans, who've gone to these legacy, long existing boys' schools and used to be whites-only universities, have been kind of quietly saying, winking and nudging on social media and in small conversations that like terrible things happened to them. Maybe they were a part of also like, you know, perpetrators in terrible things after being victims in their high schools as children, in like universities. Maybe not as bad as this. Maybe this is the most extreme example, but that there is a widespread, prevalent, shocking culture, harrowing culture of deeply traumatizing, actually injurious, injury-causing initiation rituals and traditions amongst particularly white groups of young men in universities and schools that needs to be talked about in the whole country. One TikTok creator actually made a video where he pretended like to show relief after hearing all of these allegations that it was Wilgenhof, because he thought it was about his university that he went to or his school. So there clearly needs to be a very serious, wide-ranging public conversation about this happening in all these different places. But it's interesting that this has only been found out now, and it had to be a whistleblower to do it, because it shows that there's a culture of silence. There's a culture of weird loyalty or avoiding being the sellout or the betrayer, the whistleblower amongst these legacy boys' schools and legacy white boys institutional spaces in universities that has caused everybody to keep silent, look the other way, and allow these patterns of abuse to continue. And clearly that kind of shame or fear exists well into people's adult lives such that they've never spoken about it. And so it is a conversation that really does desperately need to happen to save the next group of 18-year-olds or 13-year-olds going to university or going to high school. Hopefully, and I'm not saying it's terrible for the Wilgenhof students who've gone through this, but hopefully this is by far the worst of it and is now being dealt with, and there develops a wider conversation among South African institutions of education to deal with these horrible, horrible practices that are decades, maybe even in some cases longer than half a century old. Right, that's news worth knowing for this week on The Issue with Dan Corder. Thank you so much for watching. As always, we really appreciate it. It would be great if you enjoyed this episode, if you just pop us a like and a subscribe on the channel. It makes a huge difference. And head across to our podcast streamers where you can listen to the deeper analysis of this stuff there, as we always say. We also have a Patreon where you can subscribe and get exclusive expert interviews every single week. Just search Patreon, The Issue with Dan Corder. For a small monthly subscription, you help us keep the lights on and you help us develop this show. And in return, we give you some epically smart people saying some epically insightful stuff about the biggest issues facing South Africa right now. We'll be back in a few days. Thank you so much for watching. And lastly, go register to vote if you haven't. Go register to vote. Voter registration this weekend is happening. There's another drive, and it's so easy. Just takes a couple of minutes. Just go onto the IEC website. It's so straightforward, so you can cast your ballots in a few months' time in this pivotal election for our country.